The train screeched into the dusty little station of Willow Creek, a town so small it barely held its name on the map, but for her, it was the longest, hardest journey she had ever taken. Her heart thudded painfully against her ribs as the wheels ground to a halt, and the conductor shouted the stop. Clara McKinley clutched the worn carpetbag that held all she owned, her fingers shaking against the rough fabric. She had left behind nothing but whispers, pitying glances, and the cruel laughter of men who thought her unworthy of love. Her mother had said it outright. "No man will want a girl like you, Clara. Better you stay and take care of me till I die." But Clara, tired of being invisible, tired of hearing her weight mentioned before her name, had answered an advertisement in a newspaper. A cowboy from Montana wanted a wife. Not a pretty doll, not a fragile girl, but a partner, someone who could withstand the harshness of ranch life. Clara had written to him with trembling hands, never mentioning her size, only her honesty, her love of cooking, her strong will, and her hope to be cherished. His letters had come back slow, written in a man's uneven hand, filled with humor and gentleness. He had signed each one simply, Luke. And now, here she was, stepping off the train, tears prickling at her eyes, terrified that when he saw her, he would turn away like all the rest. She was not delicate. She was not the kind of woman who turned heads on boardwalks. She was large, soft, round in every place society said a woman should not be. The hem of her traveling dress clung to her calves as she moved, and her cheeks flushed with heat as she searched the platform for the man who had promised to meet her. Then she saw him. Luke Harding stood tall near the platform, his hat pulled low against the sun, broad shoulders straight, boots planted firmly on the wood. He was not dressed fancy, just in worn denims and a faded shirt, but everything about him radiated strength and steadiness. His eyes, when they lifted and found hers, were the clearest blue she had ever seen. Clara felt her breath leave her chest. His gaze swept over her quickly, and she braced herself for the flinch, the look of disappointment, the forced courtesy. She gripped her bag tighter, already preparing to hear him say she was not what he expected. But instead, something entirely different happened. He stepped forward, slow and steady, his boots thudding against the boards, and when he stopped before her, he tipped his hat back, looked at her fully, and let the quietest, gentlest smile tug at his mouth. "That's all I ever wanted," he said, his voice low and warm as the Montana sun. Clara blinked, unsure she had heard him right. A tear slipped down her cheek, unbidden, as she whispered, You don't mind." He shook his head, and for a moment, silence stretched between them, heavy but not uncomfortable, like the stillness before a summer rain. Then he reached for her bag, his calloused hand brushing hers. "Mind, Clara, I put that ad out hoping for someone real. Not someone to look pretty on my arm, not someone who would blow away with the first hard wind. I wanted a woman who'd stand by me, work with me, laugh with me, live this life with me. I wanted someone strong. And now here you are." The train hissed and groaned behind her, but Clara only heard the pounding of her own heart. She nodded, unable to speak, and let him take her bag. Together they walked down the platform, the stares of strangers burning into her back, but for the first time, she didn't care. Luke's stride was steady beside her, his arm brushing hers as though to remind her she was no longer alone. The wagon waited just beyond the station, hitched with a pair of chestnut horses, and Luke helped her up into the seat with a tenderness that nearly undid her again. As the wheels rolled over the dusty trail, Clara dared to glance at him. He drove with quiet confidence, his hands firm on the reins, his profile sun-browned and strong. "It's a rough place out here," he said after a while. "Winters can be cruel, summers, too. There'll be work from dawn till nightfall. I thought you should know." Clara straightened her back. "I'm not afraid of work. I can cook, sew, mend. I can keep a home. And I'll try to help in the fields too, if you'll let me." His mouth quirked into that same small smile. "Clara, I don't doubt you can. I wrote you because I believed your words. You said you wanted to belong to someone who would value you. Well, I want the same thing." Her chest warmed at his words, a heat deeper than embarrassment, something like hope blooming where there had only been loneliness. The ranch came into view after several miles, a wide stretch of golden grassland rolling to the base of distant mountains. The house stood solid against the horizon, weathered wood but strong, and a red barn gleamed to the side. Chickens pecked in the yard, and a few cattle dotted the pasture. It wasn't grand, not like the homes she had only ever read about, but it was alive, steady, full of possibility. "This is it," Luke said softly. "Home." Clara swallowed hard, tears pricking her eyes again, but this time they were not born of fear. For the first time in her life, she felt as if the word home might actually apply to her. The days that followed were not easy. She rose before dawn to knead bread and brew coffee, her arms aching with the effort, her back sore from hauling water. Luke worked beside her, never demanding, never belittling, always steady. He showed her how to milk the cow, how to scatter feed for the chickens, how to mend a fence. At night, when the work was done, they would sit by the fire, and he would tell her stories about his childhood, about losing his parents young, about building this ranch with his own hands. Clara, in turn, told him about her life in the city, about the ridicule she had endured, about the years of hiding herself away. Luke never laughed at her pain. He listened, his eyes steady on hers, and when she faltered, he would place his hand over hers, solid and grounding. One evening, as they sat together watching the stars, she whispered, "Luke, aren't you ashamed to have me, when others will look and say I'm not what a wife should be?" He turned to her, his face lit by the glow of the fire, and there was nothing but truth in his voice when he answered. "Clara, I've spent my life working this land, fighting storms, breaking my back, and still waking up every morning because this place was worth it. You're the same to me. Worth it, and anyone who can't see that, they ain't worth listening to." Her throat tightened, and in that moment, she knew she had found something greater than she ever dreamed. Not just a husband, a partner, a man who saw her not as a burden, not as a joke, but as a blessing. As the weeks bled into months, their bond deepened. They laughed over small things, shared quiet moments of peace, learned to work in rhythm with one another. Slowly, Clara began to shed the shame she had carried for so long. She began to walk taller, her laughter freer, her heart lighter. The woman who had arrived in tears was fading into memory, replaced by someone stronger, someone cherished. And Luke, he never stopped looking at her like she was the answer to his prayers. Because to him, she was. Clara woke each day with the rooster's crow, her body sore yet stronger with every sunrise, and though the work was endless, she found joy in the rhythm of it. She kneaded bread until her arms ached, stirred pots of stew that simmered all afternoon, and learned the delicate balance of feeding chickens without letting them scatter in a frenzy. Luke often teased her about how the hens obeyed her better than they obeyed him, and she would laugh, the sound strange to her ears at first, for laughter had been rare in her old life. Each evening, as dusk painted the Montana sky in shades of violet and gold, she felt a sense of belonging she had never known before. But life on the ranch was not all gentle sunsets and laughter. Storms rolled in with terrifying fury, wolves prowled the outskirts of the cattle fields, and supplies ran low when the wagon trail to town became blocked. Clara faced it all with a grit she never realized she possessed, and Luke watched her with admiration growing deeper by the day. He had married her expecting a partner, but what he found was something far greater, a woman who faced life with quiet courage, who softened the edges of his world with her warmth. He often caught himself staring at her as she moved about the kitchen, flour dusting her cheek, her brow furrowed in concentration, and he would feel a swell of gratitude so powerful it left him breathless. One particularly harsh winter tested them both. Snow fell in heavy sheets, blanketing the ranch in silence, and the cattle suffered in the cold. Luke worked day and night to keep them alive, often coming in with his coat stiff with frost, his lips chapped, his face raw from the wind. Clara met him at the door each time with hot broth, dry clothes, and a fire that warmed not just his body but his spirit. One night, as he sat exhausted before the hearth, she knelt beside him and rubbed his hands between hers to bring the warmth back, tears welling in her eyes at the sight of his cracked skin. "I wish I could do more," she whispered, her voice breaking. He caught her chin gently in his hand, lifting her gaze to his. "Clara, you're doing everything. You're keeping me alive, keeping this home alive. Don't you ever think you're not enough?" She swallowed hard, her heart aching with love, and leaned into his shoulder, the two of them silent but stronger together than they could ever be apart. When spring finally broke through, the land bloomed as if rewarding them for their endurance. The fields turned green, calves were born healthy, and Clara planted a small garden near the house, filling it with herbs and vegetables she had only ever dreamed of tending. She knelt in the dirt, her skirts trailing, her cheeks flushed with sun, and Luke would pause in his work just to watch her. He thought her beautiful in those moments, radiant in a way no polished city woman could ever be. But Clara still struggled with doubt. One afternoon, while they walked to check the fence line, she confessed her fear. "Luke, sometimes I think people will look at us and wonder why you chose me. They'll say you could have had someone prettier, someone smaller, someone," she trailed off, unable to finish. He stopped in his tracks, turning to face her fully, his expression serious. "Clara, listen to me. I didn't want someone else. I wanted you. Do you know how many women could have answered my ad? Dozens, maybe more, but it was your words, your honesty, your heart that drew me. You wrote to me like no one else ever had, like you truly saw me. And when I saw you at that station, tears in your eyes, carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, I knew I'd been given the gift I'd prayed for. Don't you dare measure yourself against other folks' foolish standards. You're my wife. You're my heart." Clara pressed her hands to her mouth, overcome, and in that moment she let his words sink deep into the cracks of her insecurities, mending places long broken. As the months passed, they found a rhythm in love as well as in work. Luke taught her to ride, though at first she was terrified of falling, certain the horse would not carry her weight. He was patient, steady, holding her hand as she mounted, walking beside her reins until her fear ebbed. The day she finally trotted across the pasture on her own, her laughter ringing out across the field, he felt pride swell in his chest. That evening, he pulled her close and whispered, "See, you were born for this life." And Clara, her cheeks still flushed from the ride, realized she was not only surviving out here, she was thriving. But not everyone welcomed her. On one of their rare trips into town, whispers followed them down the street. Clara heard the laughter of two young women behind her, mocking her size, and though she tried to hold her head high, shame burned in her chest. She excused herself quickly to the mercantile, her hands shaking as she pretended to sort through fabric. Luke followed, his jaw tight, and when he saw the tears in her eyes, he didn't hesitate. He pulled her into his arms right there among the bolts of cloth and said loud enough for the gossips to hear, "Let them talk, Clara. I married the strongest, kindest, most beautiful woman I know. If they can't see it, that's their loss." The store went quiet, and Clara buried her face against his chest, feeling protected in a way she never had before. From that day on, she began to care less about the opinions of others, choosing instead to focus on the love that had taken root between them. Seasons turned again, and soon they faced new challenges: cattle drives, broken wagons, nights of exhaustion that tested their patience. But through it all, they clung to one another. They celebrated small victories: a barn mended, a harvest stored, a calf born strong. They danced together in the kitchen when the radio played faint tunes, Luke's boots scuffing the floorboards as he twirled her clumsily but with joy. They whispered to each other in the dark, dreams of children, of growing old together on the land they were shaping side by side. And slowly, the love between them deepened into something unshakable. The greatest trial came when Clara fell ill one autumn, fever burning through her body for days. Luke hardly left her side, tending her with desperation in his eyes. He spooned broth into her mouth when she was too weak to lift her head, prayed at her bedside when the fever refused to break, and whispered over and over, "Don't you leave me, Clara. You're all I ever wanted. Don't you dare leave me." When at last her fever eased and her eyes fluttered open, she saw the tears streaking down his weathered face, and her heart broke with the depth of his love. "Luke," she croaked, her voice raw, "I'm not going anywhere. Not as long as you want me here." He kissed her forehead fiercely, holding her as though he would never let go. That illness, though terrible, bound them even closer, for they both understood then how precious each day together truly was. Years later, Clara would look back on that first day at the train station and marvel at how far she had come, from the woman who stepped off in tears, fearing rejection, to the wife who now stood proudly beside her husband, her heart full of a love that had weathered every storm. She was still the same woman in body, still soft and round, but she no longer saw herself as less. She saw herself as Luke saw her: strong, capable, beautiful, beloved. Together, They build not just a ranch but a life overflowing with laughter, struggle, triumph, and devotion. And every now and then, when she caught him watching her with that same quiet smile, he would say again the words that had first healed her heart, "That's all I ever wanted."